I thought my marriage was unshakable, until I saw the text that changed everything. What started as suspicion unraveled into betrayal, and now I'm left picking up the pieces of a life I thought I knew. It started like any other family gathering, one of those picture-perfect days that should have been filled with joy. It was Lily's birthday, a simple yet sweet celebration in our backyard. She had just turned 5, and the place was decked out with balloons and streamers. There was a cake covered in bright, silly candles, the kind she loved. Oliver, our 7-year-old, was running circles around the yard, completely high on sugar and excitement. The sun was shining, laughter filled the air, and everything should have been perfect. But it wasn't. I couldn't shake this strange feeling. You know that gut instinct that whispers something is off, but you can't quite figure out what. That was me the entire day. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure if you were about to fall or if your mind was just playing tricks. Emma, my wife, seemed distracted. She kept glancing at her phone or drifting off mid-conversation. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't ignore it. At one point, I noticed her talking to Dave, a colleague from her marketing job. Now, Emma's always had a lot of male friends, and I've never been the jealous type. I'd always trusted her completely. But that day, there was something in the way they interacted that made my chest tighten. Dave wasn't just chatting with her, they were exchanging looks, subtle, fleeting glances that spoke louder than words ever could. It wasn't something overt, but it was enough for me to notice. And once I did, I couldn't unsee it. I tried to rationalize it, convincing myself that I was reading too much into things. Maybe they were laughing at some inside joke from work. Maybe they were just good friends catching up. But as the party went on, I couldn't ignore the way Emma's body language changed around him. When Dave leaned in close to talk, she seemed different. She smiled at him, but it wasn't the smile I knew, the one she gave me. It was softer, more intimate. My stomach churned as I watched Dave linger just a little too long, his eyes trailing to her lips when she spoke. The more I saw, the more my mind spiraled. Was I imagining this? Was I being irrational? I wanted to brush it off, but the unease gnawed at me like a dull ache that wouldn't go away. Once the party wound down and the guests left, the kids finally went to bed. I found myself sitting there, staring at Emma across the room, unable to shake the heaviness in my chest. Something felt different now, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to face it. I sat down with a beer, trying to shake the feeling, telling myself I was overthinking it. But no matter how much I tried, my mind wouldn't let it go. Without even thinking twice, I grabbed Emma's phone. I'd never been the kind of guy to snoop, I'd always trusted her. At least, I thought I did. But as soon as I unlocked the screen, that trust shattered. There it was, a message from Dave. Last night was fun. We should do it again soon, winking face. My heart stopped. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. You know that feeling when your chest tightens up, and you're convinced you've misunderstood something? That was me, sitting there, staring at the screen as the room spun around me. I must have read that message a dozen times, hoping, praying, I'd somehow gotten it wrong. But I hadn't. It was right there, plain as day. Then the rage hit. It started as a slow burn and quickly boiled over. Without even realizing it, I was on my feet, phone in hand, storming toward the kitchen. Emma was there, casually tidying up, like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't just ripped apart everything we'd built together. Who the hell is Dave? I demanded, holding up her phone. My voice came out harsher than I expected, trembling with anger. Her head snapped up, her face pale for a split second before she schooled herself into that practiced, unreadable expression. What the hell, James? You're going through my phone now, she shot back, her voice sharp and defensive. She was trying to flip the script, make me out to be the bad guy. Gaslighting me, like she always did whenever we argued. But this time, I wasn't having it. Don't do that, I said, my voice low and firm. Don't make me feel like I'm crazy. Just friends don't send texts like this, Emma. What the hell does "last night was fun" mean? Emma's composure wavered, just for a second, before she scoffed. You're overreacting. Dave and I are just friends. I can't believe you'd pull this, on Lily's birthday, no less. She tried to sound outraged, tried to guilt me into backing down. But I wasn't buying it. Not this time. We stood there, glaring at each other, the tension between us thick enough to suffocate. My mind was racing, memories flooding back. Every late-night work event, every unexplained dinner, every time she brushed me off with a flimsy excuse. It all clicked into place, like puzzle pieces I hadn't wanted to see before. I couldn't believe it. She wasn't even apologizing, wasn't even trying to explain herself. Instead, she was standing there, turning it all around on me. Like I was the one at fault for finding out. When I asked her about her day, Emma snapped back at me, "You're imagining things, James. Stop being so insecure." Her words were sharp, but her eyes told a different story. There was a flicker, something she couldn't quite hide. Guilt, maybe. Or fear. Either way, I knew I wasn't imagining it. Something was going on, and it was tearing me apart. I couldn't keep this bottled up anymore. I needed to talk to someone who wouldn't just tell me I was being paranoid. That's when I thought of Sarah. She and I had been friends forever, long before Emma was even in the picture. Sarah knew me better than anyone, and for some reason, I felt like she'd understand. I didn't go into details over the phone. I just told her I needed to talk. Within an hour, she was at my door. It felt strange at first, opening up about everything, but as soon as I started, it all came pouring out. Sarah listened, like she always did, without interrupting. When I finally told her about the text from Dave, her expression changed. She didn't look shocked, if anything, she looked like she'd been expecting it. "James," she said, leaning forward, her voice calm but firm. "I've seen this kind of thing before. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is." Her words hit me like a brick. She wasn't brushing me off or telling me I was crazy. She believed me. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't losing my mind. Emma was hiding something, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into doubting myself any longer. Sarah didn't just offer sympathy, she offered a plan. "We need to figure out what she's up to," she said, her voice steady. "If she's not going to tell you the truth, we'll find it ourselves." It felt wrong, spying on my own wife, but at that point, what choice did I have? I needed answers. Sarah suggested we pay attention to Emma's routine, to keep an eye on where she went when she wasn't at home. It wasn't something I ever thought I'd have to do, but the situation was spiraling out of control, and I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. With Sarah's help, I felt like I had a lifeline. I wasn't alone in this anymore. That small sense of support gave me the push I needed to stop avoiding the truth and start facing it head-on. Together, we decided to act. Whatever Emma was hiding, I was finally ready to find out. I was barely hanging on by a thread. I needed answers, proof that the gnawing feeling inside me wasn't just paranoia, that I wasn't losing my mind. Sarah, ever the practical one, suggested we follow Emma discreetly. "If you want the truth, we have to be smart about this," she said. And she was right. Emma wasn't stupid, and if she caught us, it would only give her more ammunition to keep painting me as paranoid. So there we were, two grown adults, parked across the street from Emma's office late one evening. It felt surreal, like we were characters in some low-budget crime drama. Sarah sat beside me, laser-focused on the building's entrance, watching every movement like a hawk. My stomach churned with equal parts dread and determination. When Emma finally emerged, Dave was with her. I didn't have to ask who he was, I just knew. We waited until they got into a car, and then we followed. Sarah was careful, keeping a good distance so we wouldn't draw attention. The last thing I wanted was for Emma to catch on to what we were doing. They ended up at a small, upscale restaurant, the kind of place that exudes intimacy. The lighting was dim, the tables were adorned with candles, and the wine glasses looked absurdly oversized, like they were made to hold secrets instead of wine. It was the kind of place Emma and I used to go when we wanted to escape the world and just focus on each other. From the car, I watched as Dave pulled out a chair for her. Emma smiled at him, the same smile she used to reserve just for me. My chest tightened at the sight of it, that simple, gut-wrenching smile, now given to someone else. It felt like watching the slow-motion destruction of everything I thought we had. "They look comfortable," Sarah muttered, her voice carefully neutral, as if she was trying not to set me off. But I didn't need her to say it. I could see it with my own eyes. They were more than comfortable. They were laughing, talking, and sipping wine like it was some romantic date. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, the tension radiating through every inch of my body. Rage boiled inside me, raw and unrelenting. It wasn't just anger, it was a sense of betrayal so deep it felt like it might rip me apart. The way she looked at him, like he was the only person in the room, made me want to scream. For what felt like an eternity, I sat there, watching them, paralyzed by a mix of fury and heartbreak. They ordered food, toasted their wine glasses, and laughed, completely oblivious to the wreckage they were causing just a few feet away. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. The weight of it all crashed down on me. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice cracking as I finally broke the silence. My words hung in the air, and for the first time, I let the truth sink in. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't overthinking. This was real. And it was tearing me apart. "I need to confront her," I said, the words heavy with resolve. Sarah nodded, but there was a hesitation in her eyes. "Are you sure? You need to be prepared for whatever comes next." Her caution only fueled my anger. Why did I have to brace myself for the fallout when I wasn't the one who shattered our marriage? The thought made my chest tighten even more. It felt like this, her lies, her betrayal, had somehow become her new normal, like I wasn't even a factor in her life anymore. That night, as Emma sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, I couldn't hold back. "Where were you tonight?" I asked, not bothering to soften my tone. There was no point in pretending. She barely looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Out with friends," she said, her voice dismissive. "What's with the interrogation?" I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, hot and relentless, but this time, I wasn't going to let her twist things around. "Stop talking nonsense, Emma. I followed you. I saw you with Dave." Her expression froze. For a moment, she said nothing, her composure cracking just enough for me to see the guilt underneath. Then, her shoulders squared, and she exhaled sharply, her face hardening. "Fine," she said, her voice cold and detached. "Yes, I've been spending time with Dave. But it's not what you think." Her words made my stomach churn. "Not what I think?" I shot back. "Then explain it to me," because from where I was sitting, it looked like a romantic dinner. Emma crossed her arms, meeting my gaze with an icy stare. "I've been lonely, James," she said, her voice rising slightly. "You've been so wrapped up in work, the kids, everything but me. It wasn't supposed to go this far. It was just an emotional thing." Emotional thing. She said it like those words somehow softened the betrayal, like it was less damaging because they hadn't slept together. But to me, it didn't matter. It cut just as deep. Her confession felt like a punch to the gut, stealing the air from my lungs. My mind reeled as I tried to process it. She was blaming me for this, for her actions, like my focus on our family gave her a free pass to seek comfort somewhere else. The argument that followed was brutal. Toxic. Accusations flew back and forth like knives. I called her every name that came to mind, my words sharp and biting, driven by pain. She threw her own barbs, accusing me of neglecting her, of not being the husband she needed. By the time it was over, I felt hollow. Drained. She stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I crashed on the couch, unable to sleep, my mind racing with everything that had been said, and everything that hadn't. And in the middle of all that chaos, there was Sarah. She stayed with me, even though I hadn't asked her to. She sat beside me as the hours dragged on, listening as I poured my heart out. We talked long into the night, long after Emma had retreated to the bedroom. Sarah's presence was the only thing keeping me grounded, her steady voice a reminder that I wasn't completely alone. I didn't know what to do. Things between Emma and me had hit this eerie, unspoken stalemate. After the blowout argument, neither of us had the energy, or maybe the courage, to address the giant rift between us. But it was there, looming, undeniable. And it wasn't going anywhere. Life at home became unbearably quiet. We were still living under the same roof, still going through the motions for the kids, but it was like walking on eggshells every single day. Every conversation felt like navigating a minefield, every glance laced with resentment. The air in the house was thick with tension, and I could feel it pressing down on me every moment I was there. I knew Emma was still seeing Dave. She didn't try to hide it anymore, and I didn't bother pretending I didn't notice. But neither of us wanted to make the first move to end things. Not yet. It was during one of these long, silent evenings that Sarah floated an idea. She'd come over, as she often did lately, her presence a rare reprieve from the suffocating atmosphere at home. "James," she said, her voice calm but cutting through the silence, "Emma's already checked out. I mean, she's practically flaunting it. Why not show her that you're capable of moving on, too?" I raised an eyebrow. "What are you saying, Sarah?" A slow smile spread across her face, one that made me question if she was serious or just messing with me. "Make her jealous," she said, leaning in closer. "Let her see what it feels like when the tables are turned." I stared at her, half in disbelief. And how exactly am I supposed to do that? I'm not the one running around with a colleague. "That's where I come in," Sarah said, her tone dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We'll stage it. Something public. Somewhere she can't avoid seeing us together." It sounded absurd, like something out of a soap opera. But Sarah wasn't joking. "And where exactly would we do this?" I asked, still skeptical. Her eyes lit up as the idea fully took shape. "What about the gala? You know, one of those fancy events where everyone has to show up looking like their lives are perfect. Emma and I both know she's not going to skip it, especially when appearances matter so much to her." The thought of it made my stomach churn, but I listened. "And what exactly happens at this gala?" "We make sure she sees us together," Sarah said, her voice brimming with determination. "We'll flirt, we'll laugh, we'll let her watch. I guarantee she'll lose her mind." I hesitated. It was risky, more than risky. But what did I have to lose at this point? Emma had already broken us, and I was just a ghost in my own house, watching her slowly dismantle what little remained of our marriage. Maybe this plan was petty, maybe it was a bad idea, but it was the first time in weeks I'd felt like I had any control over the situation. The night of the gala arrived faster than I expected. As I put on my suit and stared at my reflection, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of nerves and resolve. Whatever happened that night, I knew one thing for sure: the facade Emma and I had been maintaining for so long was finally about to shatter. The gala was every bit the extravagant spectacle I had expected: dazzling gowns, tailored suits, and champagne flutes glittering under the soft light of crystal chandeliers. It was the kind of place where people came to flaunt their lives, to see and be seen. I spotted Emma almost immediately. She was standing near the center of the room, radiant in a sleek black dress that hugged her figure. Her hair was styled in that meticulous way she always chose when she wanted to make an impression. And then there was Dave, standing right beside her, looking smug and self-assured. Just seeing him there made my chest tighten with anger, but I took a deep breath and forced myself to stay calm. Beside me, Sarah appeared, a vision in a deep red dress that turned heads as she moved through the room. The fabric clung to her in all the right ways, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude, and maybe something more, for her support. She looped her arm through mine, and together we stepped into the spotlight. It didn't take long for Emma to notice. I caught her glance from across the room. Her smile faltered, just for a second, before she turned back to Dave, pretending nothing was amiss. But it was too late. I saw the flicker of unease in her eyes, and I knew she had noticed. The seed had been planted. As the night went on, I made sure to make things obvious. Sarah and I danced together, her body close to mine, moving in perfect rhythm. The room buzzed around us, but my focus was on Emma's reaction. I could feel her eyes on us, even from a distance. Her face grew tighter with every passing moment, the cracks in her composure spreading like a spider's web. It was working. By the end of the night, it was impossible to ignore. Emma's expression was a mix of anger and disbelief, her polished mask slipping more and more as she watched from the sidelines. I leaned closer to Sarah, a grin tugging at the corners of my mouth. "That worked," I said under my breath. Sarah laughed softly, her eyes sparkling with amusement. Oh, she was livid. Did you see her face when we were dancing? We stepped out into the cool night air, the crisp breeze a welcome contrast to the stifling tension of the evening. The triumph of the moment lingered between us, but something else was there too, a tension that had been building for weeks, simmering just beneath the surface. Without thinking, I turned to Sarah, pulled her closer, and kissed her. It wasn't planned, it was instinctual, the culmination of everything we'd been through together. Her lips met mine, and for a moment, the world around us melted away. The anger, the betrayal, the hurt, they all blurred into the background. It was just us. But as the kiss deepened, a knot formed in my stomach. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This wasn't just a ploy to get back at Emma. Things had shifted, become more complicated than I'd anticipated. When we finally broke apart, the reality of what had just happened hit me like a tidal wave. I hadn't planned for this. I hadn't planned for any of this. I didn't plan for this, I said, finally breaking the silence. The weight of my words hung heavy between us. Sarah turned to me, her expression soft, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Neither did I," she said. "But I guess things never go according to plan, do they?" She was right. Nothing was going the way I had imagined. The gala had been a whirlwind, and what happened between Sarah and me afterward had only made things more complicated. But it wasn't just about us anymore. The morning after the gala, Emma's reaction was swift, something I should have expected, but didn't. I walked into the kitchen that morning, the air already heavy with tension. Emma was there, arms crossed, her face a mask of barely contained anger. "So, you think I didn't notice last night," she said, her voice sharp. "You were flirting with Sarah in front of everyone." I set my coffee cup down slowly, my pulse quickening. I could see where this was going, but I was done with her games. I leaned against the counter and met her glare head-on. "So what if I was?" I said evenly. "What about you and Dave? You think I don't know what's been going on between you two?" That hit the mark. Her eyes widened, and for a brief moment, she looked caught off guard. But Emma had always been quick on her feet. "Don't turn this around on me," she snapped, her tone sharp as a blade. "You've been acting like a..." She faltered, her words trailing off. For once, she didn't have a quick comeback, didn't try to twist my words into something they weren't. She just stood there, breathing hard, her anger wavering. "That's different," she finally said, her voice quieter now but trembling with rage. "Dave and I, it wasn't like that." "Don't lie to me," I shot back, my voice rising as weeks of bottled-up anger spilled over. "You've been sneaking around for weeks, Emma. And you think I'm the bad guy because I danced with Sarah? You've been cheating on me. Don't you get that?" Her eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if it was guilt or something else. Emma had always been hard to read, especially when it came to owning up to her mistakes. She opened her mouth to speak but then closed it again, unable to find the words. For once, she didn't try to twist the situation around on me. She didn't try to gaslight me or make me feel like I was losing my mind. Instead, she just stood there, silent. The damage was done, though. The truth was out in the open, but it didn't bring the closure I thought it might. If anything, it only made things worse. After that argument, the cracks in our marriage became impossible to ignore. The atmosphere at home grew colder by the day, and it didn't take long for Oliver and Lily to pick up on it. Kids are perceptive like that, no matter how much you try to shield them from the truth, they always know when something is wrong. And in our house, something was definitely wrong. I tried to keep things as normal as possible for the kids, but the tension between Emma and me was impossible to hide. Every conversation was a landmine, every glance a reminder of how far apart we drifted. One night, after yet another fight, this one quieter but no less cutting, I stepped into the hallway and froze. Oliver was standing there, his small frame silhouetted in the dim light, staring at me with wide, worried eyes. "Is everything okay, Dad?" he asked softly, his voice trembling just enough to break my heart. "It's fine, buddy," I lied, crouching down to his level. But it wasn't fine. It was far from fine, and we both knew it. Lily appeared moments later, her sleepy eyes full of confusion, and my chest tightened. I hated that they were getting dragged into this, caught in the middle of something they didn't deserve. Emma, as usual, had already disappeared upstairs without a word, leaving me to deal with the aftermath. I knelt down and pulled Oliver and Lily into a tight hug, their little arms wrapping around me as if they were holding me together. "I'm sorry, guys," I murmured. "I promise I'm going to figure this out." But what the hell was I going to figure out? I couldn't stand being in the same room as Emma, let alone pretend like everything was okay. And the worst part was, I wasn't even sure what I wanted anymore. Every time I thought about ending things with Emma for good, the kids' faces flashed in my mind, and I felt paralyzed. They didn't deserve this. None of it. And then there was Sarah. Every time I tried to tell myself I needed to stop seeing her, I couldn't do it. It was like I needed her, like she was the only escape I had from the hell my life had become. With her, I could forget, just for a little while, how broken everything was. One night, as we lay tangled together in bed, the guilt finally spilled over. I stared up at the ceiling, the words clawing their way out. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," I admitted, my voice low and raw. "I feel like I'm losing everything." Sarah turned to face me, her expression soft but serious. "You're not losing anything, James," she said firmly. "You're gaining your freedom. Emma's not your future anymore. Don't let her drag you down." Her words hit me hard, but they didn't bring the comfort I thought they would. I was playing with fire, and we both knew it. Sooner or later, everything was going to burn. The guilt and the lies were piling up, and the weight of it all was becoming unbearable. And yet, even with all that, there was Dave, still a dark presence in the background of my life, a constant reminder of Emma's betrayal. I couldn't shake the feeling that the only way out of this mess was to face it head-on, to stop running from the inevitable. But what that looked like, I still didn't know. The only way I'd ever get the closure I needed was to confront him, face to face. I had to look him in the eye, the man who had helped tear my marriage apart, and force him to own up to what he'd done. I wasn't sure if I was doing it for myself, for Emma, or simply to prove that he wasn't untouchable. Either way, I wanted him to feel the shame, out in the open, where everyone could see. I spotted him before he noticed me. Dave was standing near the fountain, casually scanning the area like he was meeting a buddy for coffee. Even in his relaxed stance, there was this smug air about him that made my blood boil. He looked too comfortable, too confident, like nothing he'd done was wrong. I walked up to him, and when his eyes landed on me, his expression shifted slightly. "James," he said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "What a surprise. What's going on?" There was no point pretending. "You know exactly what this is about," I said, my voice low but firm. People nearby glanced in our direction, their conversations quieting as they picked up on the tension. I could feel the weight of their stares, but it didn't matter. Let them watch. I wanted Dave to feel exposed. He raised his hands, as if to defend himself. "Listen, man, nothing happened. Emma and we were just talking. She's been struggling, Anne." "Enough," I snapped, cutting him off. "I don't care about your excuses. I'm not here to listen to your lies. I want you to admit it, to my face. Admit what you did." His eyes darted around nervously, looking for a way out, but there wasn't one. Not here, not now. For all the confidence he projected before, in this moment, he looked small. Trapped. After a long, uncomfortable pause, he finally muttered, "Fine. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far." "You didn't mean for it?" I shouted, unable to contain the fury building inside me. My fists tightened at my sides as I tried to keep my emotions in check. "Well, it did. And now you're going to live with the mess you've made." Before I could say more, I noticed her, Emma. She stood a few feet away, watching us, her face pale, her eyes wide. She must have followed me here. She stepped closer, her voice trembling as she spoke. "James," she said, her words shaky but deliberate. "I never wanted this. I never meant to hurt you." Her words stopped me in my tracks. I stared at her, my voice quieter now. "Then why?" I asked, the question clawing its way out of me. "Why would you do this?" Emma's face crumpled, and she buried her head in her hands. Her words spilled out between sobs, broken and scattered. I stood there, frozen, waiting for an explanation that could make sense of the wreckage around us. But no explanation was going to fix this. No words could undo the damage that had already been done. "I don't know," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I was lonely. I felt like you didn't see me anymore. You were always so busy with work, with the kids. I felt invisible. And then Dave came along, and he made me feel wanted." Her voice cracked as she continued, her words a mixture of desperation and regret. "I know I screwed up, and I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, James. Don't leave. I can't do this without you." Her plea hit me like a punch to the gut. She was asking for something I wasn't sure I could give, forgiveness, a second chance. After everything, could I find it in me to stay? To rebuild? But deep down, I already knew the answer. I couldn't. Not anymore. The final confrontation came later that night. The kids were asleep, and the house was eerily quiet. Emma and I stood in the living room, the tension between us thick enough to suffocate. She looked at me with tear-streaked cheeks, her voice trembling. "We can fix this," she pleaded. "We can go to therapy. We can." "No," I interrupted, shaking my head. "It's over, Emma." Her expression crumbled, and her knees seemed to buckle under the weight of my words. "Why? Why can't we try?" she sobbed, her voice breaking. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay steady. "I'm not doing this for me or for you," I said quietly. "I'm doing it for the kids. They deserve better than this. Better than us." She broke down completely, her sobs echoing in the silent house. Watching her unravel was like seeing the last remnants of what we once had dissolve into nothing. But I couldn't help her. Not this time. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the room, my heart pounding with every step. As I reached the door, I saw Sarah standing outside, waiting. She wasn't close enough to have heard everything, but the look in her eyes told me she understood. She didn't say a word, but her presence was enough to steady me. I nodded to her and stepped out into the night, not knowing what came next but feeling certain that nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed were a blur of trying to find some semblance of normalcy for Oliver and Lily. I poured myself into being there for them. We went to the park, had movie nights, and I even tried my hand at cooking their favorite meals. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was truly present. It wasn't easy. Every time I tucked them into bed, guilt tugged at me for what they were going through. But I knew this was better than the toxic environment Emma and I had created. And then there was Sarah. I tried not to think about her too much, but that was impossible. She had become a constant in my life, and with Emma gone, the connection between us felt even more intense. But it was complicated, more complicated than I wanted to admit. One evening, Sarah and I sat outside a cafe, sipping coffee under the quiet hum of streetlights. The awkwardness hung between us like a third presence at the table. Finally, I broke the silence. "I've been thinking," I started, my voice hesitant. "About what comes next." Sarah looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "Yeah," she said softly. "Me too." I sighed, struggling to find the words. The truth is, everything's gotten so messy. What started as an escape, something to help me feel like I had some control, turned into something real. But now that the chaos is over, I don't know if I'm ready for this. For us. Her gaze didn't waver, but I could see the sadness there. "I understand," she said, her voice calm but tinged with disappointment. "I didn't expect you to have all the answers right now, but I need to know. Is this just about you not being ready, or is it something more?" I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "Maybe it's both," I admitted finally. "Maybe it's guilt. Or maybe it's because I'm afraid this wasn't built on solid ground. I care about you, Sarah. More than I thought I would. But I think we both know this wasn't meant to last." Her face fell, but she nodded slowly, accepting the truth in my words. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I think you're right." We sat in silence for a while after that, the weight of the moment settling between us. When we parted ways, there was no bitterness, just a quiet understanding that what we had shared was born out of circumstance, not something that could sustain a real, lasting relationship. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding, for myself and for my kids. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I could breathe again. I wasn't tied down by the weight of a failing marriage or the guilt of an affair. I was free to focus on what truly mattered, healing and being the father my children needed. One evening, as I sat with Oliver and Lily watching a movie, I realized that while things hadn't turned out the way I'd planned, I was finally beginning to feel whole again. The road ahead wasn't clear, but for the first time, it felt like I was moving in the right direction. And for now, that was enough.